Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Today, I'm talking about the episode from Season 1, The Fire, when the Walton Schoolhouse burns down. This episode was written by our very own Earl Hamner and directed by Harry Harris. The storyline in The Fire centers around a father and daughter. Father, Lutie Bascomb, played by Richard Bradford, and daughter Lois May, played by Laurie Prange. I remember working with Laurie. She was so good. I found myself just watching her, and sometimes certain performers have a style and a quality to their work that is very different from mine, and I just admire it, and in some ways I'm a little envious because I feel like what they're doing is so beautiful that I find myself thinking, oh, I wish I were more like that. Of course, we all have our own style, and that's what makes us all so unique. But in this case, I thought Laurie was absolutely perfect for the character of Lois May, who is very dominated and controlled by her father, who is basically afraid of everything that he perceives to be evil, and yet he has many, many demons of his own. And all of this becomes evident as the story unfolds. We're at the schoolhouse a lot because that's really where the central drama takes place. Lois May is in the class with the older children, and of the Waltons, that includes Mary Ellen, Jason, and John Boy. Now, some interesting things occurred to me. One being, we kind of have one schoolroom that we see, and yet, where are the younger children throughout all of this? And also, if we are talking about the older children, questions like, where's Marcia Woolery? We don't see her ever in this episode, and she was in John Boy's class. Where are Martha Rose Coverdale and G.W. Haynes? Also, my contemporaries in school. What happens for practical reasons is that the budget simply does not allow them to bring in all of these supporting actors all of the time, and particularly since none of them were really involved in the storyline. Actors don't necessarily want to show up and just be kind of background players if they are really integral characters to the series, which Marcia Woolery and G.W. Haynes and Martha Rose were. So we just sort of suspend belief here for a little bit and kind of don't focus on who's missing, but rather who is there. In this case, Lois May is the focus. Now, what did happen in this episode was, because there were a lot of scenes in the schoolroom, the additional actors, background players who were part of the episode in the schoolroom were there pretty much for all of the scenes in the classroom. A lot of those would have been shot in the same day. And then the classroom at one point moves to Ike Godsey's store. So they would have had a list of who those actors were and would have brought them in on the days when they needed to see them in the schoolroom. Two of the additional school children featured in this episode in the background, filling out the classroom, were Earl Hamner's own children, Scott and Carrie. Now, you saw Scott and Carrie, I pointed them out in the homecoming. They were there at the scene when the missionary gives out the gifts. And in this case, they are here throughout this episode whenever we are in the schoolroom. Another actress who was in a number of the schoolroom scenes, and besides Scott and Carrie Hamner, in this case, she did have a line or two, played the character of Jeanette. This actress was Lisa Eilbacher. Lisa was the older sister of Cindy Eilbacher, and Lisa went on to do such films as Beverly Hills Cop and An Officer and a Gentleman. Interesting side note, I used to audition against both Lisa and Cindy at times when characters were sort of in a bit of a 2-year age range. Cindy and I were the same age. Lisa was a couple of years older, but sometimes there was more of a range to a character, and so I did audition opposite both of them at times. Lois May's father has his own ideas about what should and shouldn't be taught in school, and he feels when Miss Hunter starts covering the Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon aspect of history and evolution, he has basically told Lois May that is teaching atheism, that it's talking about man having developed from apes, and he feels that completely contradicts what's said in the Bible. So when Miss Hunter is covering this part of her history lesson, Lois May gets up, has a bit of a confrontation with Miss Hunter, and leaves. Later on, her father, Lutie Bascomb, comes in and confronts Miss Hunter, and there is a heated altercation at that point. These eventually escalate to a point where Lutie gets roaring drunk. He breaks into the Baldwin's house and steals recipe, and then goes back to the schoolhouse, pours the recipe around the schoolroom, and sets the schoolhouse on fire. When Lutie comes to break in at the Baldwins, we don't actually see that happen, but what we do see is the humor that Earl Hamner infused into his writing quite frequently. He created these characters, the Baldwin sisters, evidently based on I believe, mother and daughter that he knew from his childhood or knew of. The Baldwin sisters are sitting in their sitting room, parlor area. They hear a noise. They have been talking about Papa because their Victrola has run out, and there is a little bit of a debate about whose turn it is to go change the Victrola. Miss Mamie and Miss Emily are each convinced that it is the other's turn, and they are listening to Enrique Caruso singing La Donde Mobile, which they talk about as having been what they were listening to when, in the homecoming, John Boy and Hawthorne Dooley come by to see if they can get gas from the Baldwins. So again, this is an episode that Earl Hamner wrote, as he did with the homecoming. So he calls back to things that were established in the homecoming. And that was always the beauty of having Earl write something, was that he knew that history of what he had created. He knew the history from his childhood that was being represented. So these were beautiful little moments. So after the sisters debate whose turn it is, perhaps this noise is Papa.
You don't suppose that's Papa's spirit, do you? It couldn't be. Papa always used the front door. Yes, that's true.
I so love the Baldwin sisters, as I have heard all of you do as well. So I love these little moments with the two of them. Another stamp of Earl Hamner here in this episode, when John comes in to talk to John Boy. John Boy's writing, it's late, and John asks him what he writes about and what's he writing, and John Boy reads it to him.
What are you writing?
Oh, you want me to read it to you?
Oh, sure, go ahead.
The house is hushed now. The hour is late. The night is still except for a whippoorwill that calls from the crabapple tree. In the kitchen, I hear the voices of my mother and father.
This scene reminded me also of the homecoming, when Olivia wants John Boy to go search for his daddy, and he talks to her about his writing and this need to set things down, to get them out of his head. So this is a very similar scene that John Boy has with his father in this episode. And just a lovely moment between the two of them. And probably it made me wonder if this was a kind of a conversation that he ever had with either of his parents about his own need to write. Would be interesting to know that. When Lutie Bascomb sets the schoolhouse on fire, because he is drunk, he trips, he falls, he hits his head, and he is trapped in the schoolroom unconscious during the fire and is killed by the fire that he has set. I was not there for the filming of the fire while the fire is being put out by various members of the community. I'm not sure exactly how this was done. There's extensive damage. The ceiling, the roof is missing, the walls are missing. So how much they burned this down, how much they had to rebuild, I'm really not sure, because I wasn't there for that filming. In order to finish the school year, Miss Hunter is in search of places to have her classrooms. She says she's found places for the younger children and just needs a place for the older ones. I'm not sure how she's going to teach in two different places at once, but there you go. Again, we're going to suspend belief and figure that maybe she's going to split her days between the two classes. She convinces Ike to let her use his pool room. In this scene, Ike is there with Hawthorne Dooley. So another character that has been brought back that we were introduced to in the homecoming. And yet interesting that we never really saw Hawthorne Dooley much in the series. So this character wasn't continued forward, whereas the character of Ep Bridges was. His character, I felt, changed between the series and the Homecoming. In the Homecoming, Sheriff Bridges was a little gruffer and a little harsher, and the way that John Crawford chose to play him, I think, worked better for the series and for his role within the community, and gave them a lot of ammunition for episodes and scenes for Ep Bridges. So interesting, the evolution of characters over the course from the Homecoming into the series and then throughout the series. I had a fun scene with Grandma here when the adults have gone to the funeral of Lutie Bascomb, and I am bored. And Grandma says, "Oh, come over here. I'll teach you to crochet." And I'm like, I don't need to crochet. I am going to discover new countries, and an explorer doesn't need to know how to crochet. I loved, again, that Mary Ellen had this desire to go out and change the world and do something that she considered important. In real life, I did know how to crochet and did make a number of different things, scarves and blankets and things like that when I was younger. In the end, Lois May's mother comes back. She has been living in Wilmington, Delaware, where she kind of ran away to when she was afraid that Lutie Bascomb was going to cause her real physical danger. And so she's tried to stay in Lois May's life, but Lutie made that impossible. Now she's hoping for an opportunity to be back in Lois May's life and for the two of them to rebuild their relationship. In the narration at the end, Earl says that Lois May, rather than following in the sciences as Miss Hunter thought that she would do, she actually married a diplomat and was living abroad. I actually looked in Earl's book, Goodnight John Boy, to see what he had to say about this particular episode since he wrote it, and whether he said anything about it having been based on someone he actually knew. It did not say anything, so I do not know whether this was a case of someone he actually knew from his youth, or whether it was just what he thought was the ending he wanted for this story. And that's what I have for you for this segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. I'll see you next time for more Behind the Scenes of the Waltons and more Ask Judy. Thanks for watching.